All right, sorry, Abhijeet, please go on.
No worries, no worries. Give me 1 second because I'll have to stop share. Otherwise, I hope you can see my screen now. Perfect, perfect. Today's workshop title is Crafting Your Speech. The one thing I want to tell you is I am not an expert, but I got help from a lot of my mentors and lot of my mentees. I've reviewed over 100 scripts in last 2 years. And when you review scripts, it really helps you understand, oh, what is well done well, or what thing can be done to take the speech to the next level. So this is a compilation of what things I have learned over the last 2 years. So here is the agenda for today. One thing I want to tell you, this is an interactive session. So ask me any questions at any moment. I would really appreciate your questions because that will help me to explain you in detail. First, we'll start with why do we need to craft a speech? Then we'll go into the style of writing. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the style of writing. Then we'll talk about topic selection, how to do a topic selection, what topics are good to connect with the audience, how to organize our speech, because organizing our speech is very important so that the audience can connect or follow what we are trying to say. Opening, what are the different ways of opening our speech? Body, what should go into the body of the speech? And finally, the most important thing, how to conclude our speech. Some of the pitfalls to avoid, and we'll have a question session at the end, but I want this to be an interactive session so that I can share all the answers to your questions. My first question to you is, Harry, why do we need to craft our speech?
So we can do better.
Yes, very true, very true. Hang,
Same thing. You want to put your best foot forward whenever you do presentation because it's not just your time, it's your audience's time.
yes, yes. The one thing I want to tell you, the speech is not for me. The speech is for the audience. So it has to be clear. It has to be coherent, and it has to be connecting with the audience. I want you to remember these three C's: clear, coherent, and connecting with the audience. Today, I'm going to share a lot of different things, but at the end of the workshop, I want you to remember these three things. These three things are: number one is conversational style. Number two, first one is conversational style. Number two is brisk start. Whenever you give a speech, we want to have a really brisk start because we can capture the audience's attention. If we don't capture the audience's attention in the starting, then it becomes really hard to get them back. And as a speaker, I have to work harder to get their attention back. And finally, we need to have a story so that we can have a connection. We can keep the audience's attention. Whenever we have a story, it has an obstacle and it creates that tension. That tension keeps the audience's attention. And when we are doing a research speech, I'll give you an example. Like there was this fellow Toastmaster in District 57, and he was talking about space and black energy. He aroused my curiosity so much that I kept my attention from the start of the speech to the end of the speech. So these are the three things we have to remember. Number one, conversational style. Number two, brisk start. And we need to have a story which can create a tension or has an obstacle, or if it's a research speech, we need to capture the audience's curiosity. Style of writing. I want to make a confession. When I started writing my scripts, initially in the first 1 year, and I showed it to my friends, they said, "You're writing like an essay." Essay? Why? They said, "It doesn't sound conversational." Conversational? I had no clue what they were trying to say. It took me a long time to understand what does conversational mean. But I found an article by Lisa Marshall. Lisa Marshall shares the secrets about how to make your speech conversational. And today I'm going to share those 5 secrets with you, which will make your speech more conversational. Secret number 1, use smaller sentences. The one thing I learned is when I started writing my speeches, I used to write very long sentences. But till like when I came to the end of the sentence, the audience would forget what I was trying to say in the starting. And when I had long sentences, it was harder for me to keep it in my mind or memorize it. So the one thing I've learned is using shorter sentences. Secret number 2, using contractions. Contractions, mostly when I'm doing a formal writing, we don't use contractions. But when we are talking to someone, we use contractions. What are contractions? Aren't is a contraction for are not. Isn't is a contraction for is not. So the more contractions we use, the more our speech sounds conversational. Secret number 3, use easy to pronounce words. I'll share a story with you. I was preparing for the Fall Fusion Humorous Speech Contest. And I was using one word in my speech, which was really hard for me to pronounce. The word was cardiologist. And after I gave the speech, people would come to me and ask me, they said, "What did you say?" I worked with an accent coach to try to polish it, but still it did not work. Finally, one of my fellow mentors, Solozar, suggested, just change that word to a heart doctor. So when I changed that word to a heart doctor, it made it easy for the audience to understand what I was trying to say. So the one lesson I learned is use easy to pronounce words so that the audience can understand each and every word you say. Secret number 4. The secret number 4 is you can use it in the opening of the speech. You can use it in the closing of the speech. Secret number 4 is rhetorical question. I have a slide on the rhetorical question. I'll go into details about that. But rhetorical questions is used to make a point, to have that dramatic effect on what you are trying to say. And finally, the most important of all, sharing your emotions, your analytical process, your thoughts, your vulnerability. When you share that, it really, really connects with the audience. I make a point, like whenever I'm writing a speech, I always try to think how I am feeling. I have a feelings list, and I try to share the exact feeling I have had while writing this speech so that those feelings connect with the audience. The feelings are mostly your emotions. So remember, without emotions, your speech is not complete. You, Frank, any one of them stood out for you?
I find the contractions. Do you mean contrast?
No. I have a contractions is Isn't is a contraction for is not. I'll talk about the next slide. See, these are the contractions. Like aren't is a contraction for are not. Okay, can't is a contraction for cannot.
I see.
So the more contractions which we use makes it easy for the audience to make it sounds more conversational.
That's a new concept for me. Thank you.
Yes. Arnie, anything for you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you. When you say it should be conversational,
Yes.
is there a difference between a speech being a conversation and the speech being conversational?
Yes, big difference. See, it should not, it's a conversational style. Conversation is, you can have dialogue in your speeches, but the dialogue should not be too long, because if you have too much of dialogue, then it kind of miss the audience. I had a fellow Toastmaster who was giving a speech, and she had a very, very long dialogue in her speech, and I lost my interest in her speech. So there can be a dialogue, but it should be smaller. This is conversational style. Whenever you are writing it, it has to have these 5 elements, which makes it easy for the audience to connect with you.
Hey, one thing more, Mr. Joshi, your friend Vasilev, president, speech champion.
Yes, yes.
I just got the email saying that you can use the style of songs like Elvis Presley song. There are one syllable, 2 syllable words.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, because see, the more easier things you are saying, the audience is going to understand each and every word you say. We want to make sure the audience clearly understands. If I try to use very fancy language, if my audience doesn't understand, then it's means I'm not able to connect with my audience. It is my loss. And remember, we are talking to an international audience. We want to connect with people from all over the world. So when you use easy language, it connects with the audience.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hank, anything stood out for you?
Question.
Yes, sure, please.
Yeah, the last point you mentioned that is sharing emotion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And but on the slides they said the analytical process and the reactions. It's the same thing.
Yes. So whatever is happening in your head, you want to share each and everything. Like, okay, sometimes we are planning something, or we are trying to process something, but at the same time, how we are feeling, we want to share our feelings. How are we going through it? I put in a lot things in that 5th point, but there are so many things I want, like analytical process, your emotions, your vulnerability. These things really connect with the audience.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this one? Conversational style?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As I told you, aren't is a contraction for are not. The more contractions you use, the more your speech sounds conversational. The thing which we have to do is, like, suppose if I'm writing a speech with, I will not go to the shop. I won't go to the shop. By using this contraction, it makes my speech easy to connect with the audience. So please remember, using contractions makes a huge difference. The next thing I want to talk about is rhetorical question. Rhetorical question is a figure of speech, and it is one of the very powerful techniques which we have. Rhetorical question is used to make a point. The goal is not to get the answer, but to have a dramatic effect on what we are trying to say. We want to draw the audience's attention to the point which we are trying to make. I'll give you an example. What's not to like? It's like, what's not to like? Here, I'm trying to make a point. What's not to like? In this rhetorical question, I'm trying to make a point. Who really discovered America? In this question, I'm introducing the topic. If I ask Ernie, what did you eat for lunch? That is not a rhetorical question. So Remember, and the best thing about rhetorical question is you can use it in the introduction of your speech. You can use it in your conclusion of your speech. And I will talk more about it in the opening as well as conclusion. Topic selection. One thing I've realized is I have a lot of my mentees who will say, oh, I cannot find a topic. But one thing I'll tell you, every day is a story. Like I had an argument with my brother. I wrote a speech about that. And I also wrote about what was the lesson I learned from that? What happened? So every day, every small thing is a story. And if we can have a lesson learned from that, it makes a big impact. What are the best topics? Any ideas, Arnie?
Sir, maybe universal, something relevant to the audience, I guess.
Very true, very true. The easiest things to talk about is your personal stories, because when you talk about anything personal, you already know it. And when you have gone through it, your emotions are attached to it. And when you talk about it, it becomes, means your emotions are very authentic, and those authentic emotions connect with the audience. Fang, I cannot see the chat, so if there is any questions in the chat, please keep me posted, okay?
Hey, Abhijeet,
Yes.
can I add a couple things?
Sure, please. Yes.
Hey, so one of the things that I've used when, I think about speech topics, what's a good way to, when is a good time to write a speech, right? Anytime you have an emotion, right? Let's say you are sad, you're happy, you're excited, whatever it is, right? Think about the moments you had a strong emotion, even just any emotion.
Yes.
There is probably a story at that point, right? So because there's some kind of story around that emotion, right? What made you happy? What made you sad? Whatever it is, or for somebody else that's involved. Then the other thing, to answer your question, I heard this really nice way to look for speech topics, right? Know, love, and care. What do you know? You can speak on that. What do you truly love? Your passions, your hobbies, whatever it is. And what do you care about? What your audience cares about?
Yes.
So
Yes.
those two techniques, know, love, care, and picking a story around any emotion you have. I just thought I would share.
That is very, very true. And I will add a story to that. I was participating in the area contest last year. And when I came in second, there was very strong emotion. And that emotion inspired me to write a speech. And the speech title was Life is Not a Sprint, Life is a Marathon. So small things can inspire you. So note down those inspirations. Thank you for sharing that, Satish. I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes. And any inputs you have, I would welcome them. So thank you. As I said, personal topics are the most easier for us to talk about, because when we talk about them, our emotions are very authentic. So any kind of personal stories can make an impact with the audience. The number one I want to talk about is interest. Like Satish said, your passion. If you are passionate about something, share that passion with the world, because passion, authentic passion, is one of the pointers of the effective speakers. There are 5 secrets of effective speakers, and one of them is authentic passion. So when you show your authentic passion, it immediately rubs off with the audience or connects with them. I'll give you an example. I wrote a speech about triathlon because I was passionate about the process, what things I learned from that process. So that was one of the topics I gave a speech on. Career. I talked about a time in my career when I was laid off, and there was such a strong emotion attached to it. And when you share something that has a strong emotion, it really connects with the audience. The third thing, family is the easiest way to talk about in your speeches. I talked about my brother in 2 speeches, and it was very easy for me to talk about because there was that emotion also, and there were things which I learned from the process. And one of the things was understanding your emotional intelligence. I was in my bedroom on the phone with Dan, and I came into my living room, and my brother said, "Turn off the bedroom light." And there was that spike in that emotion. And that helped me to write a speech on understanding my emotional intelligence. Education. You can always talk about your stories when you are doing masters or anything related to education. My icebreaker when I wrote, I talked about the time when I was doing my masters. Arnie, any other topics you can think of?
But TED Talk has a rubric thing.
Yeah.
Choose a topic you care about.
Yes.
Is the idea new? Is the idea interesting? Demand attention?
Yes.
Is the idea factual and realistic?
Yeah.
Does the idea inspire people? And in the contest, there's a contestant who said, "Where do you get your topic?" And she said, "I want to speak about something that's hard to talk about."
Yes.
I don't know.
But that is, I'll talk about the next in my next slide. I want to share my next slide because it will, that's what I'll share something. Okay. I want you to remember this 3F, and I've learned this 3F from Ryan Avery, who is a world champion. He says, if you have this 3Fs in your story, you can use any one of these Fs. I already talked about the 1F, but if you use one of this F, it makes an immediate connection with the audience. The number 1 F I talked about was family. The second F, failure. Like Satish was saying, anything when you have a strong emotional spike, it is a story. So failure is a very strong story. And fear. Fear is another thing. Like I'll give you an example. I have fear of heights. And when I started climbing the half dome, I was totally frozen. And my friends hold my hand, and because of their support, I was able to climb one step at a time. So that is my speech about fear and the support from the friends, which made a difference in my life. So always remember this 3Fs. Anytime you write about this 3F, it will always connect with the audience. And I'll share you one example. When I talked about Iron Man once, and I don't think so many people do Iron Mans. So talk about things which are easy for the audience to connect with you. Research topics. So what are the different research topics? Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, sir.
Yes,
so
go ahead.
Someone said, there is a story for every idea or subject. Where do you find the story? Could it be manufactured, embellished, or real stories? Where do you find them?
Arnie, I always use real stories because every day there is something always happening. That makes a difference.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay, that's right.
Ernie, but I would add though, if I may.
Yes, please add.
So when you Ernie, for me personally, when I read an article, recently I was reading an article about to-do lists and what somebody thought about to-do lists, right? And so some of what this person said, was aligned to what I thought about to-do lists, but some others were not. So to me, that inspired me to think a little differently about the topic of to-do lists and how I can incorporate what was in the article and even in my speech, right? So all I'm saying is your speech can be highly influenced by what you read, maybe what you hear on a podcast, maybe something a friend says to you or whatever colleague, right? So all those things, for me at least, that's how it works.
Great. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Satish, for sharing that.
Thank you, sir.
So Arnie, the one thing about me is when I'm writing the speeches, if it's a real story which has happened, then I'm very strong in my emotions and I want to create that emotional connection with my audience. I don't add, sometimes I need to add more humor, but that emotional connection is something which I'm always looking for. It's like making that with my audience.
Okay, so yes, sir, thank you.
The second type of the speech is your research speech. And in the research speech, always talk about something which you are passionate about. I'll give you an example. At my workplace, we use compostable cups, and people take a couple of sips and some, not just, so they take 2 cups at a time and they take a couple of sips of water and just throw them into the trash or compostable bins or recycle. So that inspired me to write a speech. Okay, which is the best place to trash that compostable cup? And then the second thing, are those environmentally friendly? So that was my inspiration. And the second thing I wanted to talk about is carbon tax. Do we need a carbon tax? Because that's something I'm passionate about our earth. So when my passion is there, then I can connect with my audience. Give me 1 second. Anytime I touch my screen, I cannot change my slide deck.
Just like mine.
So research topic, remember, always talk about things you are passionate about. But where can you get the material? The easiest thing, the number one. Do you know anyone knows Mr. G? You find you have a big smile on your face. Huh?
Just Google it.
Yes, yes. I'll give you an example. I was writing my communication style speech, and my communication style is initiative, and I was struggling communicating with people who have a supportive communication style. So I wanted to talk about that is how I can understand other communication style so that I can have a better connection with um, my audience or with people. And Google was the place where I found an article by Aubrey Blanche. She shares the secrets about navigating various communication styles which were different from mine. The second easiest way is books. One of the books that has inspired me is Untethered Soul. It really helped me understand that, oh, I am not my mind. So that was my inspiration. And I also was passionate about that topic. So it really helped me to share that with the audience. You can also use magazines. Like there are so many different magazines. You can even use the Toastmaster magazine or National Geographical magazines to find an articles that interest you. And finally, newspapers. Sometimes there are so many good newspapers like New York Times or Wall Street Journal. You can find some good articles that can inspire you to write a speech. Any questions so far on the research speeches or anything?
Well, the internet.
Yes, yes. Mr. G is in the internet. So yeah, very true. I want to mention again what Satish was saying. There are various styles of preparation for your speech, and I want to talk about each one of them. The first thing is, if I get a speech idea, like suppose I got a speech idea about fear when I went to Half Dome, I immediately wrote a Word document. I titled it Fear, and I scribbled some of the lines I wanted to write. And I wanted to share what things happened and what things I learned from it. So when I went back to that, it was easy for me to write my speech. The second thing I want to share is voice recording. The one thing I've learned is if I get a speech idea, I wanted to write a speech, a humorous speech for the coming fall fusion. And I got a speech idea. Immediately I grabbed my phone and recorded my speech for 4.5 minutes. That speech is already in a conversational style. Now I can take that recording and transfer it to my Word document as a text file and edit it further to make it more precise. So use your voice recording on the phone whenever you get any speech ideas. And the third thing I want to tell you is in the morning, my brain is very, very active. Like lots of ideas are coming for me. And sometimes I want to note down those ideas because if I don't note it down, then those ideas are gone. So what I do is I grab my phone and I have a notepad and I will just scribble some of the words which came to my mind at that moment. Those ideas are very helpful for my speech. Sometimes I can write an outline of my speech in the morning and then I can sit down and complete my speech. Satish, you want to add something, anything regarding
Yeah,
this?
can I offer a
Sure,
couple things,
sure,
if I may?
please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one is I maintain a story file. I use an app, the Microsoft OneNote,
Mhm.
and I have a Toastmaster folder or binder. I forget what they call it. But basically, within that, I have things like meeting notes, and anytime I go to a meeting, actually, I take notes about what I learned from that. Like 3 things I learned or whatever. And then one of the things I capture is a story file. These days, usually you have your mobile phone with you at all times.
Yes.
So instead of maybe a small notebook, other people, some people use small notebooks that they carry with them. Since it didn't work for me because sometimes I would not carry that notebook. So my phone is with me every single time. So OneNote is easily accessible on the phone. So I keep a track of, like right now, there are about 35 story ideas that have come because, I was going for a walk, I saw something, or, I had an emotion about something, etc. Right? So I write it
Yeah.
down. So that's a story file. The other thing I've recently started using, I like the voice memo idea.
Yeah.
The other one that I'm using is an app. It's a free app called Otter, OTTER .ai. It basically is a speech to text app,
Yep. Mhm.
and the reason it's good for me is I can actually write my speech by kind of speaking it out, right? So mostly, right, you have to still tweak it a little bit, but I can write the whole speech because I like writing my speeches out. And
Mhm.
so I can not only record the speech, but I can actually write it without writing, if you know what I mean, because it's speech
Yep.
to text.
Yep.
So those two things I'll offer as
Yes.
ideas.
And Otter is it a Android app or a Apple OS?
Yeah, I've used it on Apple. I think there are both platforms that support. They must be supported. I'm an iPhone guy, so I don't know for sure, but I think they are.
Okay. Otter, yeah, I will remember. I'll try because I have an Android phone. I can check it.
I mean, the
Thank
other thing with Otter is if you're doing interviews and such, if you let's say you're doing some research, you want to capture what the person is saying. You can ask the person. It can be tied to Zoom. Otter can be connected to Zoom, and so you can actually even transcribe the interview that you're doing as part of your research, so you can use it in your speech without having to write it down. So.
Wow. Thank you so much, Satish. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Organizing your speech. Organizing your speech is the most important things. I want to share a couple of ideas on that, which most of the Toastmasters know about it. The first thing, our when we are organizing a speech, there are only 3 things needed. One is introduction, body, and conclusion. So introduction, we used to just always introduce your topic in the introduction. I've seen many people who don't introduce their topic in the introduction and the audience is lost is, what is he talking about? So try to introduce your topic in your introduction. The second thing I want to talk about is the body. Body is mostly where you have your main ideas, and you can use the rule of 3 main ideas. You can have 3 main ideas, and then what you do is you just elaborate or have a um, supporting material for those ideas. The most important thing is when you have those three main ideas, the transitions are very important, because when you're moving from one point to the another, make sure your audience is with you every moment. If your transition is abrupt, you will lose your audience. And the most important thing about any speech is conclusion. Here you can make the most amount of impact on your audience. And this is the organizational method which we all know in Toastmasters. The first thing is tell them what you are going to tell them. Miss you, we are introducing our topic in this first introduction. Then we tell them what we are talking about. And finally, in the conclusion, we repeat the same thing. Tell them what you have told them. Because when you do this repetition, it really reinforces your message on the audience. Opening of the speech. There are various ways of opening your speech. I'm going to share different examples from my speeches, how I've started my speeches. And I want you to tell me which means the one thing I want to tell you is don't use just one way. Try to use different ways so that you can learn each and every way. What happened was I was always starting my speeches with my question. And my mentor immediately pointed it out. No, no, no. You are not going to do that. You are going to use various ways of starting your speech. That makes an because then I learned all the various methods. Why is opening of the speech important? I'm going to talk about that. What are the things are important in a successful opening? The first thing, we need to grab the audience's attention. If we don't grab the audience's attention with a strong opening, then as I told you before, it becomes really hard to grab their attention later on in the speech. And as a speaker, I have to work really hard to do that. The second thing, always introduce your topic. If I don't introduce my topic in the introduction, the audience is lost. Is what is he talking about? Always make a connection in your introduction, because always talk to always talk about the topics which relate to the audience, because when you talk about the topics which relates to the audience, it creates that instant rapport with the audience. And finally, your opening should be only 5 to 10% of your speech. It should not be very long. Any questions regarding openings before I go into the various techniques of the openings? I'm going to share each and various techniques which I have used in my speeches. I hope I remember. Sometimes I start my speech with a quote. I was doing a mentoring speech, and then I started the speech with a quote from Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill said, "We make a living with what we get. We make a life with what we give." And my mentor taught me how to give. So that was my opening of my mentoring speech. And it created an immediate rapport with the audience, because I was quoting Winston Churchill, who is well known all over the world. Audience participation. As I told you, I was talking about those compostable cups. I asked the audience, how many cups do you think we used in the Santa Clara campus in 1 year's time? And when I asked that question and I was trying to get the answers, I was using the audience participation method. So this is also very effective when you want to get the immediate attention of the audience. Arouse suspense or curiosity. I was talking about, I had a speech title, My Defining Moment. The way I started the speech, I want to share the first 4 lines of my speech. It was March 7th, 2010. I was pedaling through New Zealand as part of my first Ironman. And then, bam! A disaster happened. That was my defining moment. What is your defining moment? So I immediately aroused the curiosity because I didn't tell the audience what disaster happened. So these are the various ways you can capture the audience's attention immediately. Tell a story or anecdote. I recently started a communication style speech with a phone call. Hey Raj, let's go to the bank. I need $5,000 urgently. When is a good time for you? Afternoon works. So when I started with this story or the anecdote, immediately it's like, okay, why is he asking for $5,000 and what is happening with it? So immediately it captured the audience's attention. You can always start with stating why this topic is important for you. When you share that why, it creates an instant connection with the audience. Like I'll give you an example. When I started the carbon tax speech, I shared why it is important for me because I care about the earth and I want to make sure I leave it in better hands for the next generation. Rhetorical question, as I told you before, rhetorical question can be used in the starting of the speech. It can be used in the conclusion of the speech. It is used to make a point immediately or even introduce a topic. Like, who really discovered America? I'm introducing the topic in my introduction. Any questions regarding these 6 techniques? Oh, sorry. Anyone? Satish, any other opening techniques you have used in your speeches?
I was actually sorry, I was driving. I was actually trying to remember, but I usually I like the list you have, and the way I remember it, I mean, it's very simple.
Yes.
Question, quote, joke, anecdote, and a story. It kind of you'll never forget that when you. It's almost like a rhyme, and
Yes.
there's about 10 different techniques. I just don't remember them all right now, but if I remember, I'll bring it back. I'm sorry, I was driving. Otherwise, I would.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thank
much,
you.
Satish.
Yeah, yeah.
Any questions, Yufeng, anything about these opening techniques?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, please.
In your earlier start slides, you mentioned that one of the criteria for successful opening is introduce the topic.
Yes.
I agree that it is important if you talk about something informational, to tell the audience some structured information. But if you just want to tell a story, how did you introduce the topic? If you want to leave the suspension at the end, or if you want to give any surprise.
Yes, definitely. Like when I told you about that story about the Iron Man, I wanted to introduce my topic is I'm going to talk about my defining moment.
Okay.
Okay, I immediately defined it. Okay, this is going to be about my defining moment, and then it will come in the body. Okay, what was my defining moment? Okay. Openings to avoid. This is very important. Okay, there are 3 things we need to avoid. The first thing is don't tell the audience that okay, it took me 3 days to write this speech. The audience will not connect with it. So try to avoid saying how much amount of preparation it required for you to write a speech or prepare the speech. This is very important. Avoid being dull or boring. I want you to have a brisk start so that the audience is with you from your first sentence. Your first 2 sentences are very, very important. Never start it with fellow Toastmasters and guests. Always check your mic before the start of the meeting because those first 2 lines are so important. You can immediately make a connection with the audience in the first 2 sentences. This is my pet peeve. Like I've seen many speakers who don't introduce the topic. We want to introduce the topic in the introduction. Body. In the body, I'm going to talk about 2 kinds of speeches. One is a story, one is a research speech, because they both have different things that are required to make a connection with the audience.
Hey, before you,
Yes.
sorry, Abhijeet, I
Yes,
just
go ahead.
remembered something that I thought would be useful to the audience.
Yep. Yes.
So, there are some words like imagine.
Yes.
So, starting a speech with the word imagine
Mhm.
is, to me, I find it really, really powerful. Imagine you're standing on a ship in Antarctica. It is cold. You can hear the sound, the squeals of the penguins and the seals in the distance.
Yes.
Like just that, when I said that, hopefully some people started actually imagining that they were on a ship and they were listening to these sounds of, right? So that's
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
I hope that's useful. And then the other one was data. I was just trying to remember what are all the other techniques I've used. So, using a statistic or some kind of a data point, right?
Mhm.
That is quite interesting. I don't know why there's echo, but a data point is really something that I've also used, especially in a professional setting. I find
Yes.
that to be really effective when you use the data point.
Yeah.
And then last one, in terms of words, imagine and what if. I know it kind of can fit into the question part, but it is really using. Uh, it's almost like saying it's another way to say imagine. What if you know the coronavirus never happened? How would your life be different? Right. So, just anyway, that's what I.
No, this is very important because
Couple of
you
things.
are using, actually, you are using communication languages. One is auditory digital. When you talk about data, you're connecting with the audience with auditory digital. When you are talking about imagine, you are using visual aspects with auditory aspects also, as well as you are also connecting with the audience with kinesthetic, because you're also making them feel how you, because when you started talking about Antarctica, I immediately felt, oh, it was cold, and I could see the penguins. So those are the different
But
communication language you are connecting with the audience. So those are very powerful, Satish. Arni, you had something?
you, sir, yeah, thank you so much. How dramatic or theatrical can you go? Lighting a cigarette or Bill Gates releasing a bottle of mosquitoes, playing a harmonica, or falling down on the floor. Things that are theatrical. How are those really good or something only for professional, or is going beyond what is necessary?
It depends upon you. If your story demands it, you can do it. Like I will give an example. All these things, like lighting a cigarette. There was this speaker, world champion of 2015. If you can, I think he's used that kind of a technique in his speech. And I have seen Darren LaCroix just falling on the stage. So people use different techniques. It depends upon you. What are you comfortable with? Make sure anything you do, feels authentic to the audience and it can connect with the audience. If you are not comfortable of doing it, then don't do it. Your comfort level is very, very important.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arni.
One question. This is for you, Abhijeet, as well
Uh-huh.
as the audience. I've always wondered, what about props? Using a prop. I mean, what Arni just said, right? Maybe that can qualify as a prop, like Bill Gates releasing mosquitoes from a bottle, right?
Yeah.
What do you guys think of, or in Abhijeet, maybe, what do you think of using a prop to start the
Oh,
speech?
it is very powerful. It immediately makes it makes a connection, very strong connection immediately. If your story demands it, use the prop. That is very helpful. One of the things I will judge a speaker depending upon how effectively did they use the prop. So prop, I feel, is a very good way of using or starting a speech with that. Thank you, Satish, for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Body. Body of the speech is very important because here we have to maintain the audience's attention. Now you had a strong opening, but body is where you can lose the audience. So how do we make sure the audience is still connected and listening to what we are saying? So here are the two things which I want you to remember. The first thing in a body, if you are talking about a story, make sure the story always has an obstacle. When you have that obstacle in the story, like the disaster happened in my story, that was an obstacle. And it created the tension in the story so that the audience was able to stay glued with me. So remember, whenever you have a story, always have an obstacle which creates tension, which helps the audience to stay connected with you and listen to each and every word you say. The second type of the speech, if it's a research speech, always arouse the curiosity of the audience. If you want to keep the audience glued, the curiosity is the easiest way. As I told you, I recently heard a speech from District 57. He was a division contest winner. And when he started talking about the dark energy in the space, I was like, and the way he was explaining it, very easily for me to understand. I was glued to his speech. I listened to each and every word, and it made an impact for me. So remember, these are the two things important in your either a story speech or a research speech. So when you're writing the body, always remember, write your main points. What are your main points? What are you going to talk about? Once you have those main points, then you can fill in what are the other things that are required. The second thing is those main points need to be arranged because the transitions have to be seamless so that the audience is with you all the time. And the third point is elaborating those main ideas with your supporting material. So this is mostly will happen in your body of the speech. Here is just a sample structure of the speech. There are hundreds and different samples, but I just wanted to share one sample. Like you can have an opening of the speech where you always start in the middle of the action. If you start in the middle of the action, it immediately grabs the audience's attention. Like when I was talking about the Iron Man speech, I started in the middle of the action. I introduced the topic that, um, that my topic was my defining moment. And then in the body, I started developing my story. I overcome the obstacle. And finally, conclusion. I shared my lessons learned and also call to action. So this is a sample. There are many, many samples. I just wanted to share one example of a story. So I want to say three things about the body. Always remember, good speeches, you cannot write a perfect speech in the first go. The first thing I do is whenever I know I'm going to write a speech, I will just glue myself to my chair and not get up until my draft is ready. And there is nothing like a perfect draft. Once you have a draft, then you can edit it and make it more precise. What I do is once I write the draft, I do not check up that draft for 2 days. After 2 days, I'll just go back and start editing it. And that will help me to make my speech more precise. My draft is very different from my final script. So don't worry about writing a perfect speech. Once I start editing my speech, I always keep an eye on the word count. My space is different. Everyone's space is different. Like when Dennis Dawson speaks, he speaks at 125 words a minute. I speak at 100 words a minute. Another example I will give you. Press Vasilev, which Arnie was mentioning, only had 479 words in his speech. while Ryan Avery had 732 words in his speech. So depending upon your speaking pace, try to understand what is your word count per minute, and then tailor your speech to that word count. Any questions regarding this? Anyone? Henry? Harry?
Determine words per minute.
Yes. But can you repeat the question?
Okay, you're using the term 100 words per minute. How do we determine that we are speaking that long or that fast?
So record it. Okay, always record your speeches anytime, and you will come to know, okay, what is your pace? Suppose like I have 500 words, okay, and I'm taking 7 or 8 minutes to speak about it. Then I know my speech means my speed is a lot lower. Means my speed is maybe around 70, 80 words a minute. Okay. So it's very easy to, like, suppose if you have a final draft of 700 words and check it, how much time you are taking to deliver that speech.
So for a typical 5 to 7 minutes speech in Toastmasters, so 600 words is ideal.
Very, very true. Yes. Always remember, when you are on the lower side, it gives you enough cushion. We should never, ever go beyond time, because you have worked so hard on your speeches. You never want to go that over time. So 600 word is a really good number.
And one reason that's true is, people, at least I used to forget to account for pauses. And if I'm going to share something funny, you can't kill the joke by speaking over people that are enjoying what you just said.
Yes.
So, if you can account for those, then, pauses, by the way, one of the hardest things to master, but one of the most powerful things, the sound of silence.
Yes.
And that'll extend your speech time.
Yes. It makes a big impact to the audience if you pause. Any other questions, anyone?
Mr.
Yes,
Joseph, can I get back to good speeches are rewritten or written?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to the problem now of written words are different from spoken words. So how do you blend written words with the spoken words so that it becomes a speech word or something else?
No. So what happens, Ernie, is I'll tell you. Whenever I have a speech ready, I'll go to the Toastmaster Club, I'll deliver it. I'll get some feedback and I will incorporate. If I feel that feedback makes sense for me, I'll incorporate in my speech, and that changes my script. And then again, if I go to a different club, they gave me another feedback and that makes sense for me, so I will change my script. So it's like I'm rewriting. My script is changing every time when I'm getting feedback. So that's what I meant.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Arnie. Conclusion. Conclusion is the most important thing. We need to end with an impact. I want to share the criteria for successful conclusion. Number one, it achieves a sense of closure. Because whatever, like suppose if I shared a story, what was the reason for me to share that story? And it kind of concludes what I was trying to say. As I said before, it makes an impact. Like a strong conclusion can win you a speech contest. And people will never forget your message if you have that strong message in your conclusion. Conclusion is very similar like introduction. It's always nearly 5 to 10% of your speech. I'm going to share various criteria of doing a conclusion. Different closing techniques. Number one, easiest way, summarizing your main points. What are your main points? Just summarizing it. That is the easiest way to conclude your speech. Why do we do that? Because when we repeat something, that really reinforces our message. the audience will not forget what I'm giving a speech tomorrow, and I'm summarizing my speech 2 to 3 times in the middle so that the audience will not forget the points which I am trying to make. The second closing technique is call to action. Because remember, a speech is always a gift for the audience. Why are you telling this to the audience? Because sometimes what we go through, everyone can go through, and we can share that similar same lesson. We can encourage the audience to see. Like, I'll give you an example. I talked about my communication style, and then I said is I learned how to navigate various communication style. And then at the end of my speech, I asked the audience, what about you? Have you ever been in the similar situation? If yes, we can follow the same technique. So here I'm including the audience and I'm also giving a strong call to action. You can also, another 3 closing techniques, which I'm not discussing here, is you can close your speech with a quote. You can close your speech with a rhetorical question. And you can also close your speech with an anecdote. Book ending is one of my favorite closing techniques. I connect my first line of the speech to my last line of the speech, and it makes the complete circle. Whenever I was giving my speeches, Lindy McLean always gives me a feedback. She said, "You need to make a complete circle in your story," and that is impactful to the audience. Like, here is an example. The guy is talking about the remarks he started his speech with. You can do that, or you can even have similar kind of lines, what you had in the first line and in the last line. Connect your story completely. Here are the tips for success. Always memorize your conclusion. The one thing I'm learning is it is good to have your 2 or 3 different conclusions. Have a backup plan. Like, suppose if you have a plan A, which has 100 words in your conclusion, also have a plan B to have the similar kind of conclusion in 50 words. Because sometimes if audience is laughing at your jokes, as Satish said, we cannot cut the audience off. We need to wait until the response kind of dies down and then we can pick up. But we also lose time in that. So having a plan B is always important. As I said before, ending on time is very, very important. If you have a very good speech and if you don't end on time, everything is lost. This last year, one of the finalists went overtime. He worked so hard to get to that stage of the finals, and he lost it because he went overtime. This is one thing which I've seen is some people add new points in their conclusion. Never do that, because it throws off the audience completely, because audience is not expecting that. So please avoid adding any new points in your conclusion. Here are some of the pitfalls to avoid. The first thing is boring start. If you have a boring start, the audience is lost, and makes your job tougher to get their attention back. So have a brisk start. I have seen some speeches which have a chronological order. Like in 1992, I did this. In 1994, I did this. 2005, I did this. Chronological order, it does not connect with the audience. We need to have, we can just take that 1992 and expand it. Share your emotions, share your analytical process, your thought process, your vulnerability. That makes the connection. Chronological order of a speech doesn't make the connection with the audience. If you don't have a message in the audience, in the speech, then it's your lost opportunity. I have a fellow friend. She gave a fantastic story, Fonda, but at the end, she did not share that message. What things she learned from that story? If she shared that message, that story becomes a really powerful story. And finally, make sure to have some tension or curiosity, or arouse your audience's curiosity. If there is no tension, no curiosity, the audience, you cannot keep the audience's attention for a longer period of time. Here are my final 3 takeaways. The first thing, always use a conversational style in your speeches. It really connects with the audience. The second thing, have a brisk start. Grab the audience's attention in the first 2 lines. And the third thing, create tension in your story or arouse the audience's curiosity. It makes a big difference. Great is the art of beginning, but greater is the art of closing. Questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering, what if I find that my audience is sleepy or is inattentive when my speech is coming to the end? Is there any way to save my speech?
Yes, there is always something, because we have a very strong tool. It's our vocal variety. Okay, we can make that impact. We can pause. We can come up with a very loud noise or very high pitched noise or very low voice. That makes the difference. That can bring the audience back immediately. Play with your vocal variety. Vocal variety is 38% of your communication, and it's a very, very, very powerful technique.
I see. Got it. I will try it. Thank you.
Sure. Anytime. Any other questions, anyone?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, please, Ernie. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. You're always my role model since I first met you at Cisco Toastmasters International. 3 things. Does the title of a speech introduce your topic? Point 1. You mentioned rhetorical question. You're not talking about rhetorical devices like rule of 3, antithesis, repetition, and so forth, but rhetorical question that could be sarcastic. And 3, where do you inject humor if you need to inject one? Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Let's go with the first question. Your title is important. I'll give an example. Like if you can grab the audience's attention with the title, that makes the difference. Like Press Vasilev, his title was Changed by the Tire. Okay. Then another world champion, his title was Power of Words. And then I think Lindy McLean's one of the title was Your Buried Stories. So these titles, they immediately grab your attention. So that makes the difference. So have a really good title. It takes time. Like when I started with one of my titles, I didn't get the immediately. I started with Uncharted Waters as my title. But as I gave that speech 10, 15 times, people helped me with my title, and then my title changed. What is your defining moment?
It's true.
So your second question.
Hey, second question.
Yes, rhetorical question. I think I'm just talking about rhetorical question. I think you added some more things. I don't know them. Okay.
Okay.
But what was your third question?
Where do you inject your humor if you have one?
Yes. So what I did, I wrote my humorous speech initially. I just wrote the draft. But then later on, when I start thinking about it, which lines I can add humor, there were specific moments in there, like, oh, I can add humor. Like, I was able to okay, this is a place, this second paragraph, first line, I realized, oh, I could use my self-deprecating humor in there, So read your script and you will find easiest way to use is self-deprecating humor. Yes.
Hi, Abhijeet, this is Vagesh.
Hey, Vagesh.
I think one of the, if you narrate personal experiences, especially in your speech, you move close to the audience. So whether your experiences or anything, like assume you're working on a speech where you're talking about a new solution. So then how you came up with the solution, before that, what problems you encountered, those kind of things, right? So which gives like audience a different view perspective in that way. So that is another thing to catch, I think.
Very true, Vagesh. I truly understand. The more you share your experiences, that makes the impact. So what happened and how it happened and what did you learn from it? It makes a big impact for the audience.
A
Any other
question.
questions? Yes, Harry, please.
You mentioned that preparation is very important, and you often need to write it down and rewrite it. My question is, after you finalized and then you give a speech, and how much percentage do you actually find that you actually use the script word by word, or you go off the script?
I will give you an example, Harry. Okay, this is my process. This is what I followed until recently. If my speech is on Wednesday, I nail down my script maybe Thursday. Okay, my script is nailed down on Thursday. And then I only memorize 1 or 2 paragraphs. But as I'm memorizing it, I change the wording. I make it more conversational. I'll make it easy for the words to flow. So it keeps on changing. And as I complete the speech in 3 days, I'll memorize the speech in 3 days. I'll not do a speech in one day. So then it comes in my head rather than it's not exactly from the script. So it will change. I want to use the words which are easy for me to flow when I'm talking with the audience.
Okay.
Thank you, Harry. Diana, can you put your comments in the chat so that I can understand what you're trying to say?
Yeah, her question is how I do body, start, story, body.
Oh, okay. Body, start, story, body. So the one thing is your body is going to be always in the center. You start with a bang in your introduction. So, and the introduction, as I said before, it only should be 5 to 10%, so not very long. And then you go into the body. And your body is maybe 4 minutes, but then you have another 5 to 10% of the speech in your conclusion. So body only comes in the middle, not any other place. Any other questions, anyone?
I have a question
Mhm.
that you mentioned that a fellow Toastmaster told an excellent story, but without a message. So
Yes.
that must be the message is not very easily seen in the story. So in case of that, how do you work out the message? Maybe there's more than one message from the story.
Definitely. Stories, you see, the message can be anything what you feel. Like I'll give you an example. Pres Vasilev just changed the tire. Okay. And he had a different message. So it depends upon you what you learned from it. He learned from that story that asking people for help is not a bad thing. So remember, your message can be what you learned from it. And try to have only one message. If you have 2 messages, it's okay to just pick one and go with that.
Does that message need to be intentional? What about if somebody just want to share a story, a story that, close to his heart?
Yes, but see, something closer to heart, but there is a reason why he wants to share. Right? Why? There is that why reason if you can share. Okay, I want to share this story because I learned something or I went through something. There is something there,
Okay.
Yeah, for transitioning, I feel like I have a hard time going from point to point. What would you recommend for a beginner transitioning?
Going from point to point in your body of the story.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. One thing I'm doing is whenever I'm going from one point to another, I will try to introduce the second point in my first point. Like, okay, the next thing will be this. So when I'm explaining that I'm taking the audience with me, or another thing I can use is I can also use my stage. Okay, you can use your stage as an anchor point. This is point number one. Then you're talking about point number two in the middle, because then the audience knows that, okay, now you're on point number two. And then you can also shift for point number three. So there are various ways of using your stage to guiding your audience that, oh, you're moving from one point to another.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sir, who is your role model, speech writer and speaker? Who are or who is?
Ani, the one thing I've learned is everyone has some speciality which I can learn from. I don't want to box myself with one style. So I want to learn from all the people. But the one person which really, like, which I cannot emulate is Lindy McLean. Whenever she gets on the stage, she lights up the stage. It's like she's singing, she is dancing. And it's like, oh my goodness, that grabs the audience attention. That is something I've never seen. You can feel the passion in my heart for her, right?
You always
now,
do you always give a speech standing, sometimes sitting?
Yes. No, I've only once in my life gave a speech sitting down because someone asked me to sit down and give the speech. I will never, because I don't want to alter my speaking style. Like when I go back in person, I am always going to stand and give a speech. I always want to stand and give a speech.
Including in the company meetings?
Company meetings, yes. Like I'm doing a presentation to my VP this Tuesday. I'm going to stand and deliver my speech.
And I also find it looks more professional.
Yes.
Like you take it serious and
How do you find time to memorize more than 100 speeches this year?
It's the one thing, the one thing I'm learning is the memory becomes stronger and stronger. The more you rub it, the more polished it gets, the more faster you can pick up things. And now I'm moving to a different kind of speech. I'm trying to not have a script. Like tomorrow I'm giving a speech. I don't have a script. It's all in my head. I have 6 points and I'm going to talk about those 6 points. So it's like a different transitions, which I'm trying to make. Our brain is very powerful. I'm just amazed. If there are no further questions, I will now return the control to Jasmine. It's all you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Abhijeet.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for a very well-structured, very engaging workshop on crafting speeches. In just shy of an hour and a half, you covered all the important pieces of all the different parts of a speech, and there's so much takeaway that we're probably a lot to digest for us for quite some time. And also I also like to thanks to the audience for a lively conversation because of Abhijeet's engaging conversation. Thanks everyone. Very good workshop indeed.
I really enjoy when the audience asks questions because that really helps me. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. All right. Without anything else, Yifang, I would return this back to you if you have a further club business to discuss.
Hi, everyone. This workshop is brought to you by ASML as we Toastmasters. If you haven't signed our guest book, please sign. The link is in the chat. Let me put it in the chat again. And next month, we will have another workshop on leadership through laughter. So make sure your email is there, then we can reach out to you. And that's all for today. Let's give Abhijeet another round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yifang. And
Yeah,
please come back, Mr. Joshi.
Definitely, definitely, Harry. Definitely.
we can stop recording now, Hen.